Oh man, it is early in the morning. Not really that early. Not like I usually am doing my live streams, but it is 9:34 a.m. right now. I don't know what you're doing, but I think I'm going to see if I can learn how to use this tool. And it's by this guy named CG Tinker or CG Thinker. I'm not sure. But this is actually not the tool itself 100%. This is known as BlendArTrack. Now I brought you to this video for what is known as BlendArMocap. Now the reason why I brought you to this screen starting out is because I'm not 100% sure if I need this in order to do the BlendArMocap, which is the ability to go on Blender and use face shapes and hand shapes and body poses through your webcam and to detect basically the pose positions, your hand positions, or your facial expressions and translate it into Blender. So with no further ado, if y'all folks want to learn how this works, hopefully I can get it to pull off on my Windows computer. If you don't have a Windows machine, you're going to have to follow his methods and techniques. I'm going to show y'all folks how to do it off of my Windows machine if it works on my Windows machine. So it's more like a test / experiment. This is the guy here. This is his video. I put the link in this live stream's description area so you can get to this video. So he gives you the how to, and it's actually a Blender add-on that is a free add-on that is currently in a beta release. But if you want to donate, you can definitely donate to him through this Gumroad page that he has, cgtinker.gumroad.com. I put the link to this as well in the video's description. So just check out the description if you want to try to get this add-on. It's, like I said, $0, but you can donate any amount that you want in there. So you put how much you want to put in there, and then you go try the add-on by clicking this button. I already did it, so I got the add-on. Here goes how the add-on shows up on your computer. BlendArMocap. And then you can double back and get this as well. I got this from one of his videos, which is the BlendArTrack. Just type into Google Play BlendArTrack just in case if you need it. But I don't think you're going to need it for this particular instance. But you can use his BlendArTrack also based on other videos that he has on his channel. So let me bring you to his channel, by the way, because I'm giving this guy as much credit as possible. He definitely could use subscribers and viewers and basically get as much support because he is a developer, obviously, and he came up with something really unique. So here goes his channel, CG Tinker on YouTube. So you can type that into YouTube as well to get to his channel. And I did not put the link to his channel, but you can check that out through his video, which is the video that I just showed you here on Blender, right? Say you wanted to animate. I just recently threw up a live stream about this thing called rapid frame technique. I developed the technique because you can develop anything on Blender how you see fit. It's up to you. You can become a developer as well for Blender. If you learn Python and you get into the Python coding, you can develop add-ons and things like that. And they have some add-on apps that actually allow you to develop without Python coding. It's crazy, but they have different developers that can come up with ways for you to do it. But you have to know somewhat how coding works to some degree. So it's not 100% independent of coding. You gotta know something. So, all right. Say you wanted to, let's just put in an object, right? We'll go in and add an armature. Let's try that. Now, I don't have Rigify set up here. Let me go and get Rigify so you can see what I'm talking about. Go to Edit, Preferences, and then type in R-I-G, the Rigify. Let's activate the Rigify add-on. What it does is allow you to get an automated rig built into the screen, so you don't have to do all the rigging from scratch from that single armature that you saw. So let's go to save. Oh, we got to go over here. All right, save preferences. Now we got Rigify. It won't come up over here as an add-on. What it does is it builds it into the add section when you go to armature. So once you go to armature, it's no longer just a single bone. It gives you the ability to add multiple rigs. So say we go for this meta rig, human meta rig, right? We're not worried about the head too much, matter. And we want to start rigging it. Not rigging it, or we want to start animating it. Say we turned it into the advanced rig. So you go to the main icon, this icon, the lower portion of the right. You go generate rig. So you got the rig sized and you got everything, right? So you wanted to animate stuff, and we get this to hide because we don't need that, whatever. So you wanted to animate this rig, and say this rig was tied to digital bones. I mean, not digital bones, to a mesh, a 3D mesh. One thing that I learned how to do is use the play button in the timeline, animate. So you hit the play. Whatever your gap between 1 to however have, like say you got 250 keyframes set up, so it's from the first frame to the 250th frame. So you have that looping, or you say you want to drop it. Let's drop it to 100. That doesn't matter. So your distance between your start frame and your end frame is 100, right? You go over here to the right of the screen. You go to format. For some reason it's not coming up to have the play going. Output properties. Go to output properties, far right module over here on the screen. Go to frame rate. This is powerful stuff. Pull this out. You go to frame rate, change this. You can change it to whatever you want, but let's go to custom so we can bring up this custom option. What Blender recently added, which I didn't realize how powerful it is, it added this base option. Go to the base option and let's change the base to 20. Now look at what it says in the custom. Up here in the custom it says 1.2. So somehow whatever frames per second you have sitting here is a division, is a divisor going on of 20, I think. So if you divide 24 into 20, you get 1. That's what I believe it. I have no idea. Let's put it up to 100. See what it does now. Now it's 0.24 frames per second. So I believe that's definitely what it's doing. It's a divisor. So it's dividing whatever you put in your FPS here, custom. So you can drop your frame rate tremendously all the way below 1 frame per second. So at 1 frame per second, let's just type in 1. Instead of it, go to custom. The base is reset to 1. Let's type this in right here. So 1 divided by 1 is approximately, right? So at 1 frame per second, let's hit the back arrow and hit the play. At 1 frame per second, look at how fast it moves, right? Just think about how the timeline is moving. So when the timeline is moving, even if you hit the play button, you can create animations, meaning you can create keyframes. But if the timeline's moving too fast, it won't give you enough time to figure out your next move. So that's where the rapid frame technique comes in. So I believe, I don't know if that's the purpose of them creating the ability to drop the frame rate down even further, but you can create multiple moves before the actual playhead moves to the next frame. So that's amazing because you can create a lot of different stuff, but you would have to know ahead of time exactly where you want that particular object to move, or that particular joint, bone, etc. So whatever you're choosing to animate in the screen. So say, let's get this box here. not really a box, but we go to, I selected the armature, we go to pose mode, we select this little box thing, right? We select the move tool. Now we can move the armature how we see fit. And this armature is responsible for controlling the mesh, is moving the mesh of a 3D object. So if I put in a mesh, I set it up with automatic weights or whatever, it's going to move that particular mesh how you move this box. And based on how it's set up by the developer set it up for IK constraints and controls. So basically it allows the hands to stay in one position, stay stuck in one position, and feet to be staying stuck in one position. So if you say you created a walk cycle, it would lock the feet to the floor, so to speak. So the feet would be locked when it's moving. Now, if you created a motion capture type of thing, you may be able to edit out easier if you use this particular armature as your rig. I don't know. I really don't know that much in terms of the motion capture pre-configured data, or say you decided to tie it to Blender and get the motion capture data to be live or whatever the case may be. I don't know how that will work with the foot locking and the IK because I never really did it on Blender. What I do know is if you was manually controlling the model and creating the foot movements and leg movements and every other body part, this is a great technique. So what you do, like I said, you hit that play and you start to move stuff. But you're not going to be able to get the keyframes in there until you decide to either hit the I key on the keyboard and then create an actual keyframe at that point. And you see the keyframe was created. You can do it that way by hitting the I key, or you can use the automatic keyframe button. Either way, you can do some amazing stuff if you slow down the frame rate. So let's slow down the frame rate by just increasing this number here. Now look what happens to the playhead. Playhead is going to slow down tremendously. So now it takes pretty much a long time for that playhead to move from one frame to the next frame. So that gives you enough time to figure out which orientation you want to move it at, which direction you want to move it at, and how you want to move it before you create a keyframe. So now you can pretty much skate through your keyframe creation and predetermine where you want to set your playhead to move at. So how fast you want to create your animations or how slow you want to create your animation by slowing down frame rate, which is crazy. So a good example would be, say I wanted to rotate it at this very moment in time. The only problem when you have the play running is that you don't see the handles. So you might have to hit the R key on the keyboard to create the handles. If you hit it twice, then you're allowed freehand motion. So you can rotate it freehand like this. Now, with automatic keyframing set up, as soon as it moves to the next keyframe, it's going to jump and create that motion. So if you move the mouse too fast, it's going to create some distorted, jumpy animations. You'll see what it did. So now let's increase this back to 1. You'll see. Once it gets to the keyframes, it's going to start jumping. See that? So what I did is I didn't create a good smooth transition. I created an animation as jumping. But now from the last keyframe from the keyframe that I just created to the next keyframe, you'll see it transition slowly. Let me zoom in, show you what I'm talking about. So as you examine this technique, you'll be able to discover new ways of creating animations much faster than the slower method, which is frame by frame and having to eye it frame by frame. And also you can create a fluid dynamic type of animation creation if you adjust. So you have to adjust your frames per second exactly to where your mouth mouse is moving in a good smooth motion to create the actual frames to show up on the screen. So when you're dynamically moving like from across the screen like this to make like something move, like maybe a car, whatever, and you want it in a circular motion, you can create all the keyframes exactly how you see fit just by moving the mouse. So this is one of the things that I figured out, and it took me some time to figure out how to make that work with the play button moving, the playhead. But it is possible. So a good example, let's bring it down to, leave it at 1, just drop it down to 7. See how the playhead moves then. So you have to kind of time it to see how you can move the object. So that looks like it's going to move really good with my mouse. Now, another thing you have to do, once you check your animation, you have to see how that works with the actual timing per second. So each second, you might get 60 frames in that 1 second, right? So you want to see how that plays out to like when you're doing the render. So when you test your render, you're going to see how the object's actually moving in real time based on actual seconds as opposed to maybe point something. This is like 0.79 frames per second. So you're doing micro motions, obviously. See how it's moving very slow? So those micro motions might actually work in real time when you speed up the process and you go to the full render view. So this particular thing is not going to show in a render. Right now it's in the armature mode, so you're not going to see it. But I can actually tie it to like maybe a cube or to something else. I'll show y'all folks. Let's see if I could do that. Go back to the beginning, bring in like a cube, put it in the center, and then try to tie the bones to that. Let's try that. So we're gonna go out, go to object mode, go add, go to cube, and let's reduce the size. We'll bring the scale down. We're just gonna tie it to the rig. Doesn't matter which parts, but I think I'm gonna tie the center to it. Have that selected, bring it down, scale it down, and then select that center box. Actually select the rig itself, there we go, and then do Control P and parent it with automatic weights. So I don't care the shape of it, all I care is that it moves. So we're gonna go here, hit the play, bring up timing. I'm gonna change this back to about 8 or whatever, just to prove what I was talking about. But we'll bring this back to 1. I'm gonna increase this all the way up to 4 frames. Now we'll see how it's gonna move it. See, so that's the move that it actually created. Pretty interesting, right? So you can do that, creating micro motions, bring down your frames, and then actually create and construct the animation in slow motion, but it's actually making the motions move fast or back to normal pace. It depends on where you want to put and set your keyframes at. Look how fast it jumped. That was crazy, right? See, that was a fast jump. That's because what I created was janky motion. So what I could do is separate these keyframes and drag them out and put distance in between the keyframes. And now get better motion. Look at that. Now that is powerful, folks. You can do so much stuff doing this. And don't limit yourself. Like, take your mind to the next level with doing this. Start thinking outside the box, seeing how far you can take it. Like, I can use this huge rig with just a robot head. Just put the head in that place right there. I don't have to rig it 100% the way it's set up as. And then I can create multiple other rigs for other body parts if I wanted to. And then tie them together and just create the animation. As long as the animation turns into what you want it to turn into, and it looks like you want it it doesn't matter how you rigged it. That's how I think, because it's not about exact identicals and accuracy 100%. It's about the end product that you're trying to get. When I'm saying, I mean, in terms of the rigging process and all of that stuff, you don't have to be the best animator, the best rigger. You just have to come up with solutions, like things that make it work, that make it look a certain way. So what you're doing is, all you're doing is driving this 3D object. So this armature is driving the 3D object in multiple directions. That's all it's doing. It's not really a big job. It's not that big. Just telling it to go right, left, up, down, rotate this at this point, change this particular axis at that juncture in time, move this fast or slow down. That's what animation really is. So why constrict yourself to what the rig is in general? You don't have to if you don't want to. You can improvise, and you can come up, you can turn this into a rig for a weapon if you wanted to. Have it separate from your main rig for your character, and then use, like what I was saying, the whole rapid frame technique that I developed is to slow down your keyframes, not speed them up. Slow it down as slow as you can get it, so that you know how to control exactly what you want to build, and then you can play with the keyframes and separate them when you're done, and then you'll get the normal speed that looks somewhat acceptable to what a human eye can accept and think that it wants. So let me just do a test render just to show y'all folks what it looked like. But I don't care, like the visuals on the background and all that stuff. You can play with the visuals on the background over time. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna hide the rig so you can see the render when it's rendering. So I'll just select the rig. All right, there we go, and hit H. You don't even need the rig in the screen, and I'm gonna hide everything else. And N and the T key just to hide everything. And just bring this up like that. Hit the play. There it goes. Now it's animating. See that? It's looping at 100. So you can do all kinds of different things. I'm telling you folks, you can really think outside the box and come up with amazing things. That's why I'm not really too stressed about what I'm doing here, playing around with this thing, with the what do they call it? Hold on one second. What did I call this title? Blender VR Mocap. I'm not worried about the Blender VR Mocap thing failing, because I know I'm gonna create tons of videos to show people unique ways to create animations, because I know some of the basics now to Blender. Once you know the basics to Blender, you can take it to whatever tangents you want. You can just think outside the box and be as creative as possible. That's what makes Blender so much more powerful than anything else out there, because it's free. That's the first thing. So it's free for you to learn. You go on it, you don't have to pay some type of subscription year after year after year, or month after month after month to keep it going. So it's not budget dependent. It's not dependent on your budget. It's dependent on your creativity and your application and your usage of it. So you have to apply yourself to it. So first you got to dig, learn the information, learn the knowledge, go as far as you can with the knowledge, then go back to the basics of the navigation and understanding how to manipulate, in 3D in general. So how to manipulate, how to get to the graphics portions of it, how to manipulate imagery. That's what, like I said in the beginning, it's computer generated imagery. That's what you're doing. So you're going in, generating images, or you're taking imagery and you plugging it into it from an image file, so a JPEG or a PNG file. You plug in imagery into it to manipulate the graphics. Good example. Show you another thing. So we go to shader editor, right? Go to new. I can't do that yet. I have to select the object. So I have to be in object mode, obviously, to manipulate the object. I select the object, go to shader, the shader editor, which is here, and then I go to new. When you do that, that allows you to manipulate the texture. So what is manipulating the texture or shader? All you're doing is manipulating the graphics that's going to be applied to that 3D object. So that means the image that you're going to put on it. What type of image are you going to put on it? So I don't have what is known as a UV map for it, so it's not going to map 100% the way I want it. But if you wanted to map every detail onto that 3D object exactly how you wanted it, or every corridor and space and particular surface of that 3D model, say it was a 3D model that you created of a human or whatever the case may be, you would have to understand from, if you was going from scratch, how to map it out. So you have to learn UV mapping. UV is basically a 2D dimensional conversion from 2D to 3D. So you take a 2D image, you map it onto a 3D model, and then it becomes a visual that looks like an actual object in 3D space. So in order to place that imagery on it, you use what is known as a shader editor on Blender. So you go in, you go to add, and you go to texture, then you go to image texture. This is manually doing it. You don't know how to do it with the nodes. Then you go color node to base node. You just tie these two together, and it's that simple. Don't worry about anything else, but this is the principal BSDF. That's the node for this one, for node connections. And then you have the output, material output. And then all you do is just tie in the image. How you tie in the image, you go to open, select it, and then it ties into your computer. You look in your computer for a particular image. So say I wanted to go and grab any image. I don't care what it is. Doesn't matter to me. I can grab anything. Tie it in and hit open. So what that should do is go in and configure itself to the image. In order to see it, you have to change your viewport shading to material. And then you can sense what's on that graphic. Look at that. It built it in. See, so now it's not just a cube. It's a cube with a face on it. So hopefully this demystifies some people's mindsets in terms of how you can actually manipulate in 3D. But since I didn't shape it and mold it as an actual 3D figure of a human, then I'm not getting exactly what I wanted it to have. Plus, I didn't UV map it. So all it's doing is taking it and putting that 2D, 1D, 2D image on all of the planes of this cube. So it's just wrapping it over it. That's all it does. So that's what these nodes are doing. They're taking it and wrapping that image in a specific manner. So say I wanted to manipulate, I can go in and manipulate some of the texture using these different sliders here, and I can make it any way I want it to look based on, you know, the graphical changes and different features of this. It's more like a module, but it's a node connections. So that's one of the things. And then when you go and you try to basically hit the play, now it looks like it's moving with imagery. So you're just basically manipulating the imagery. That's what Blender does. That's simple. You're manipulating images. But most people don't realize, and the whole thing with the 3D graphic of the 3D model itself, the model is just pixels when you think about it, constructed on the screen and stored in Blender. So it's stored in Blender so it can sit on a specific space of the screen. So it sits there until you animate it. To animate it, you have to have a rig tied to the model. So the rig will take those pixels and move them all in the same direction. It will tie it together. So they're all moving in a particular position on the screen. And that's basically that part. It's very simple to understand, but obviously it's complex what it's doing. You don't have to worry about what it does. You just have to worry about how to make it do what it does. So that's the whole thing with Blender. You have to know how to make it perform screen. So if you don't know animation on Blender, it's because you didn't do research, learn the basics to animation, and then the basics to how the animation software works on Blender itself. So you got to dig, research, and find out that stuff. Like right now, I'm hitting the space bar on the keyboard instead of using the timeline. There's certain hotkeys on Blender that could help you to bypass certain things, or maybe you want to display it in a certain manner so it bypasses other things. One other tip I got for folks, dealing with the graph editor, right? So say you watch my other live streams in the past. If you didn't, you want to learn some of the stuff that I've been tripping over mentally and trying to learn about with the graph editor, you go in and change your different modules here. by hitting this little icon with the circle on the left. And let's switch it to graph editor. And in the graph editor, what I didn't realize is there's multiple things that you can do in the graph editor. A lot of different steps and procedures and things that you can figure out and puzzle together. But you can play with the graph editor. Let me pull up the bones. But you have to have the bones. You have to have the rig. Obviously, if you don't have the rig, then it's not easy to see the bones working, and it won't bring up the keyframes too much. What I did is I hit the alternate key and the H key, and I brought up the bones, but I don't see, they're not visual. They should be on the screen here. So the reason why they're not on the screen is because I have the shading shut off. So show overlays. So I have the overlay shut off, and I have the gizmo shut off. So now the bones is shown. So you see the rig / bones. Here goes the bones for the rig, and there goes the armature. So that's why you see all these keyframes that showed up. But normally they wouldn't be showing if I don't have it selected. What this does, this whole thing controls the rig in multiple directions, so multiple axes. So you have XYZ axes, you have multiple ways to control it: location, rotation, and scale. Don't worry too much about what it says here with the Euler and the Quaternion, but you can look that up and research that, Quaternion and Euler, and what's the difference between that. Basically, it's different axes adjusts. So you have your gizmo, your XYZ coordinate axes, and you can change the configuration of the gizmo and how it's rotating around a specific axis. You can change the origin. You have origin point and origin positions of where the 3D, more of the scene of the 3D viewport is set up. So this is all for your brain to configure, but not just that, it's also staging so that Blender can be compatible with other 3D software requirements. So other 3D software may require you to have your origin point set at a certain specific point in the viewport based on the industry standard to what 3D elements is supposed to perform. So in dealing with CGI, computer generated imagery, there's always going to be an origin point for 3D. So usually the origin point is going to be the 0, 0, 0 position. That means X in the X direction, Y direction, and the Z direction of 3D coordinate plane systems is going to be 0, 0, 0. So as you can see here, pull this up. This is the 0, 0, 0 point right here. So the Z direction currently is going vertical, Z. See, there goes the gizmo. And then we have the horizontal or horizon line, which is not clearly horizontal here. It looks diagonal. But this is purportedly or supposedly the horizon, or depending on how you orient the screen, either the Y-axis could be the horizon line, or the X-axis could be the horizon line, depending on your 3D orientation, but they both in the horizontal plane, X and Y. Normally, in a regular graph, the Y is the vertical axis, X is the horizontal axis. But since they introduced the 3D element, the third dimension, that's where the Z axis comes in. Blender by default is set up as the vertical axis, and the Y and X is both horizontal. So that's where the whole 3D scope comes in. So if you don't understand those basic things, hopefully you got what I was saying there. But once you understand those basics, the Blender's orientation in the viewport, then your brain can basically configure to what the graph editor is doing, so to speak, because the graph editor requires you to know which locations, which rotations, and which scales, and what axes you're on. And also these are considered to be channels, because you can select them and deselect them. You can click on them, left click on them, and make them disappear or make them reappear. Or you can activate something, you can lock something in the screen that you don't want. No, those pertain to what is known as F-curves. F-curves are also known as frame curves. So these curves here will help you to manipulate whatever you animated. So whatever has a keyframe that you created, maybe through automatic keyframing when you was using the beginning with the timeline. So you see all these keyframes that I was playing with that I created, they all gonna be indicators with these yellow dots in the graph editor. So with the graph editor, it doesn't work like a normal graph. It's not 100% like a regular graph. This is interactable, so you can interact with it. So think of it as a way to control what's on the screen. So these are controllers. You have to look at the graph editor that way as opposed to it being a regular graph. But in terms of graphical analysis, you can use it to analyze the motion as well, but you have to go a little bit deeper into learning the mathematical side and the physics side to things. And that deals with when you right click, you go to an area of the curve and you right click, you have this interpolation method. So that takes mathematical understanding. But you don't have to know math to change these different options. What it does is it just changes the curves in between point to point. So whenever you go from one frame to the next frame, it will change the graph. And it will orient the graph on how you see it. So say it was a round circular curve, not round, but a sinusoidal type of curve, like going up and down and shooting straight up high in the screen. If you see the curve doing that, in between node points, you can right click and you can change how you want the curvature to look. So if you want the curvature to look like a square wave, you click square and it will take it and try to create a square wave. Let me hit the back, go undo. So it's going to take in between these node points, whatever you have selected. You have to select them, obviously. You hit the A key, it selects them all. That selected them all. But if you don't hit the A key, you can hit the left click mouse button and deselect all of them if you want. You can drag and create a region, select region, and just select a certain area. See that? And you can use the circle select. So you hit the C key on the keyboard, create a circle select, and you can circle exactly what you want. If you want a larger region, you just use your mouse scroll wheel, scroll it in, scroll it out, using your mouse scroll wheel. So these are the different things that you can do. It's amazing, right? But also, what I just recently learned is pretty powerful. You can insert keyframes along a path that was pre-created for you or that you created. So you can create paths of keyframes, which is amazing. So if you have like a graph going up like this and you deleted all the keyframes in between, you can manually insert keyframes where you want to insert them on the graph itself. So I recently learned how to do that, and that's pretty powerful. If you guys want to check that out, check my future videos on the how to exact video that I'm going to be creating in the future on the graph editor. I'm really going to try to break this down so people can learn it in a Gerber baby food version, so they can understand it even if they're just the average person who doesn't know anything about animation. I'm going to try to break that down like that, because I do know now, building up the knowledge day by day, I'm just going hard. I've been going hard for almost a month on the graph editor, and I'm really starting to decipher a lot of different things, but that the average person doesn't know, and even advanced users. Like there's this guy who went to school. He also became more of an animator for big time studios and stuff like that, and he opened up Blender, tried Blender. I guess maybe he was on it for a few weeks or so, or maybe a few days, and he couldn't figure out why can do certain things on a graph editor. So even those type of people who have knowledge and skills and they have the experience with the graph editor, they may not understand how Blender has it set up. So I'm going to make sure that I create this video for everybody, not just for one person, one type of person. The reason why I'm doing this is because it took me years to get out of the stumped pot. I was like in a stumped position with the graph editor. I really didn't want to use it, and I pushed it to the side of my Blender experience, and I just felt that I didn't want to learn it because it looked too crazy. As you can see, it looks crazy, right? But don't get intimidated by it. You have all these options up here, even these little options. Some of these things might be intimidating. I don't know about the errors. It says only show errors. That's not intimidating, but like, what the hell is a ghost curve? And filters, I don't know where I would use these filters for. I still don't know how to use these, but maybe someday I'll figure it out, or I'll look it up on a YouTube video. We got pivot point. I know how to use pivot points because they have a pivot point option up here, and I've been using it for a lot of stuff with animation. So if you don't know how to pivot around certain things, you have to. You got to learn how to control your mouse and pivot where you need to pivot when you're creating animations and stuff, mostly from scratch. And even doing animation cleanups. Let's see, nearest frame. I don't know what this pertains to, but I'm gonna figure that out too. Now I recently learned about proportional editing. I'm gonna do a separate video dedicated to proportional editing because it's really a highly detailed tool, and you have to really focus upon what you're doing with it. And you can really understand it over time if you get the right person to basically showcase in detail how it works in its entirety. So I think I've wrapped it up to the point where I know everything about it. I'm not sure 100%, but I know at least 80 to 90% of what the proportional editing of F-curves is and how you can do it in multiple ways. So I figured that out one day, and then after a while I just started puzzling everything else together, and I figured it out in a live stream, which is crazy, just like this. So just to figure it out live, that's mind-blowing in itself. I wasn't able to figure it out before that, but since I ran into it on the screen, I just kept trying to figure out what I'm doing and how it will work. And I know how to do proportional editing when it comes to shape keys. So I guess I had a little precursor to proportional editing in general on Blender. So that's probably why I was able to figure it out. But before I was using the graph editor, obviously I never ran into that. I didn't even know it existed. And then they have this other option here where you can pull off different things. So with your proportional editing, you can do smoothing, sphere, root, inverse square, sharp, linear, constant, random. So none of this stuff pertains to anything but the proportional editing and the fall off. So I don't know 100% what the fall off means, but I know how to make this function as well. And it basically will turn the proportional editor into a smoother type of graph or a sphere type of shape curve. If you're trying to proportionally edit the curve, it will turn the curve into a sphere, a root, an inverse, a sharp curve, a linear curve, or constant, which would be a square wave. Or random would be more like a jumpy, hilly type of mountainous curve. So you can do all of that kind of stuff using proportional editing, and that's pretty dope. But just to show you real quick, one little thing you can do, you just click on the proportional editing, you select the keyframe, and then you just start moving it. But guess what? I'm not just moving that, I'm actually moving the graph. I mean, not the graph, the rig. Look what I'm doing. See that? I'm stretching the rig out because what I just grabbed is actually a scale. So I grabbed the F curve for a scale, which is probably the X axis. But to figure it out, you have to isolate. So let's isolate and shut off everything else. See if that's indeed the X axis. So, yep, it's the X-axis torso scale. So you don't actually have to shut everything off because it highlights in yellow. So let's just shut off everything now and see what happens. So we're getting rid of everything and anything that isn't it. Okay. Yep, that's that. And something else is selected as well. X scale, get rid of that. And what else is here? I think I got everything deselected for the most part. And this right here is just this is the origin. So the one that's blue here isn't an actual F curve. What I did is I created a scale. See that? So I could actually manipulate just that if I wanted to, or I can manipulate everything. Now with the proportional editor, as you see that little circle, move it closer so you can see it. See that circle that shows up? That circle is an indicator of where the proportional editor is at. What it does, it's responsible for you to make it tinier. It means that you're covering a smaller surface area or a much larger surface area of effectiveness. So you're affecting more in that area. So I can drag additional keyframes up with it. See that? So now I created a full graphical curve, and it affected the shape, distorted the entire rig because I'm adjusting in the scale. Most people wouldn't do that unless they're doing like a ball animation. They want to make like an elastic look in a specific angle and position. So they'll play with the scale for that, maybe when the ball bounces and like comes down and crushes itself. So they'll crush it in like maybe the Z-axis when it's coming down and hit the floor. And then for it to elastically expand to go back up, they'll just move the curve so that it goes up. So when you're playing around with this kind of thing and you're using the play button, look what it does. It's amazing. See, now it created a stretch because it only animated just that portion right there of the screen, not everything. See, so that's how you would create the elastic type of thing. So if you make a micro adjustment, that means if you bring it down just a slight bit, proportional editing you would have to change. So you have to make this circle smaller. So how I'm making this circle is using my depressing of the mouse scroll wheel. Now I can bring it down, and now it's not going to be so much of a huge stretch. See, so it's a micro stretch. Now if I want to animate that in a render, I can do a test render. We'll pause it, and we'll get rid of everything and test render it. You'll see what it looks like. So we'll go view, viewport render animation, and obviously we have to know where we're going to send it. So go to that output thing, and then we'll go and send it to a particular folder on the computer. So we will send it to our animations folder, create a new folder for it, call it anim2, and then double click it, and that's the folder we're sending it to. Accept it, go to view, go to viewport render animation. Now it's going to render that animation. See that? So you just have to dig. Keep doing research. That's what I recommend. And you can get better and better and better at this stuff. And you can make some amazing creative looking things. I mean, there's no limit to it. Like I said, don't limit yourself. If you limit yourself, then that's where you're going to get stuck. Let me take off automatic keyframing. I had automatic keyframing set up. But let me just move this in the screen a little bit more so you can see it. We'll do that again. So let's test the do the render or whatever. And we want to see how in full speed what it actually looks like. It's probably going to be too fast. So to test it in full speed, you go up to render in the top of the screen, and then you go to view animation. Instead of rendering the whole thing, we're not rendering the whole thing. We're just doing a test render. So we go to view animation. We'll see what it looks like. This is what it looks like, what I created. Interesting, right? So now what you have to think back is, what are all the things that I did to create it? I manipulated the graph editor on the scale. I did rapid frame technique creations of animation. So I animated it on a low FPS. And that's how I got it to perform its move. And actually, this is not the typical rig. This is a rig for an actual 3D model of a human. But guess what? I got it to control an actual cube. And now the cube looks out of shape. So it's like, I don't know, not even a cube anymore. Like a rhombus or something like that, some kind of shape. So there you go. Hopefully that helped y'all folks in some sort of way. But I'm going to be putting out multiple videos in terms of how to. I'm going to show folks exactly how to do proportional editing in detail, like maybe perform a particular animation, because it's not going to be something that you're really going to need unless you know what you're doing with the graph editor exactly in detail to a specific purpose. So you have to give it some sort of a purpose. Why do you need to proportionally edit? You don't just go off and just proportionally edit for nothing. pretty much. So it's a tool, something that you're going to be using in the path of your knowledge base doing animation, so you can perform a particular thing like a squash, like I just did, because it's not going to be necessarily that easy to pull it off when you're manually doing it through frame by frame. You know what I'm saying? So by creating a graph, it creates that elastic motion. So this graphical, from this point to this point to this point to this point, creating like a sine wave sort of look, created that elastic motion. So it's not easy for you to create that on your own, hand by hand, to make it so smooth. You know what I'm saying? So that's why you would have to know something like proportional editing to create that elastic move. Things like that. So hopefully that helps you in some sort of way. Oh, and then the other tip is that the reason why I brought y'all folks here in the first place to see what I'm doing on the graph editor. Now they have Blender hotkeys, right? So they have the F3 key that brings up this option, which you can do searching real fast. If you don't know the hotkeys, don't worry about it. You don't need to know it. Reason being is because you go to key over here, and then you'll realize over time that the same options is available here. So you just got to go through and pull this down and start to look and see what it does for you. So you go to, let's see, automatic easing, and then you scroll down to the bottom, and you can see it has clean keyframes, decimate ratio, decimate allowed change, clean channels. It goes to alternate 0 that I was typing the previous days when I was doing these live stream sessions. So smooth keys is there, alternate 0. Sample keyframes, shift, alternate 0. Then you got bake curve, unbake curve. You can do all of these different things, so you don't need to know the hotkeys. But if you learn from here over time, you start to develop the hotkeys knowledge base. To get to clean keyframes from the hotkeys, that's when you're going to press F3. And then you're going to type in what you're looking for. So I type in clean, and then clean keyframes comes up here like that. But to me, that takes longer. You just go in, scroll down, and click and select clean keyframes. And then when you're here, you just hit the arrow, and then you can just go like this, try to clean the keyframe. Like so. Now it's not going to clean the keyframes unless you select them. You got to select all the keyframes, obviously. And then right click on the right click mouse button. Maybe, let's see. Or hit the arrow key on the keyboard, make that go away. And then go to key again, scroll down. If you want to smooth keys, you can smooth them. See what smooth keys did? It takes the graph and drops it down a little bit, so it's not so rigid. So say it was a rigid curve like up here, it drops it so it becomes more smoother. Let me do that again. Go back to key, scroll it down, smooth keys, or you can hit the alternate 0 key on the keypad on your keyboard. And let's see what the animation does this time. So it basically smoothed it down. Not stretching as much, but it's still moving up and down. So now if I wanted to activate, say I wanted to activate all the keys, and not just keys, but I want to activate all of the positional orientations, aka all the channels. They call them channels. That way you don't have to keep saying positional orientation in your line. So you go to where it says object, if it's a 3D object, which that's what I'm controlling. You hit this I and hit it again, and it brings them up and highlights them all. And then the same thing with this one over here with the rig, brings them all back like that. You can also make them all go away and just select one I, and then bring up just that particular orientation. So there you go. Now everything is selected. So these are the moves here. If I wanted to change the moves, I can manipulate them as well. So now what it would do is move in different directions. For now it's linear going up and down, but if I was to change stuff, it would change the direction. So I'm doing proportional editing still, so let me grab it and then down that proportional editing. Nothing. That way I can only bring up certain ones. So what is being selected, what is not. There we go. See, so now I'm dragging it different directions. But since I don't have automatic keyframing set up, it's not creating keyframes. But what it's doing is it is definitely changing the graph. So when you go along, it's going to change the direction of the animation. That's the other benefit of using the graph editor, because what it will do is change the direction or orientation for all of the keyframes if you chose all of the keyframes. If I selected all of the keyframes and I moved, it's going to change everything, the whole entire keyframe segments. So everything will be changed. That's how you can fix stuff in a graph editor as well. By selecting all the keyframes, you can fix everything all at once. But if you want to fault isolate, you want to isolate certain things, you're going to have to shut certain things off like that, so it won't affect that particular location, rotation, or scale. That's it. I'm done with this video. Joy, love, and peace to all. Mike Pugh signing up. Hopefully you learned something towards the tail end. I apologize for it being so chaotic because I'm missing information. Like I don't have the developer knowledge. I'm not really that skilled on the developer end of things. So there's no way I'm gonna figure out right away how to get this thing working. It takes me a lot of time to do the research, to puzzle in just one little thing to figure out what these developers are telling me to do. To get that add-on, that what is it, Blender VR Mocap add-on to work. Obviously my computer, it's not working it. So yeah, Joe, love, and peace to all. Mike Pugh signing off. I'll see y'all folks in the future videos. If you want to hang with me and do this live thing or not, whatever, it's all good. I have to make a move. I have to do things in my real life, get on the ground, do some hustling, make some money, or whatever I got to do. And other than that, I'll see you next time. Feel free to subscribe. Feel free to hit the thumbs up. Feel free to share my videos socially if you feel that these are going to benefit people. 9 times out of 10, what I'm going to do is just edit out this video, turn it into like the tail end of it, and change the title, because I really wasn't able to achieve anything with it. I tried. It was an experiment. It was a test, but it failed. But other than that, I'll come back once I create the effective one, the one that has all of the how to do stuff for the exact title for that particular purpose, to bring up that Blender VR Mocap on the screen so we can control what the developer was intended for us to be able to control in the screen. But other than that, I'm out of here, and I'll see you folks next time. Peace. See, we got, before we leave, we got Eric. He says, look, those Explorer on scripts. TV got more TV. One thing I'm glad about is that no one showed up as a freaking spammer. I've been getting spammers left and right, day after day, and all this stuff, but I think I blocked them all. But yeah, man, I'll see y'all folks next time. Peace.